In 1822, a man sold bonds for a country that didn't exist on the London money market. The most sophisticated financial minds in the world bought every single share. That same man had already printed the country's currency, drawn its maps, written its constitution, built its government on paper. He had even published a 355-page guidebook describing the capital city's cathedral, its opera house, its cobblestone streets, and its thriving port. None of it existed. Not one building, not one street, not one citizen. 250 people sold everything they owned and boarded ships to go live there. More than 150 of them died. And the man who built this country out of nothing, out of pure, calculated fiction, never spent a single day in prison. This is his story. To understand how Gregor McGregor pulled this off, you have to understand who he was. Because he wasn't some back-alley swindler. He was something far more dangerous. He was born on Christmas Eve, 1786, in the Scottish Highlands. The McGregor clan had a long history of military service. His great-great-uncle was the legendary outlaw Rob Roy McGregor. It was a family that understood power, image, and reputation. McGregor joined the British Army at 16. He fought in the Peninsular War against Napoleon. He was, by every account, a competent soldier, charming, well-spoken, and possessed of an almost supernatural ability to make people trust him. In 1811, he sailed to South America. Venezuela was in the middle of a war of independence against Spain, and McGregor, like many ambitious young men of his era, saw opportunity. He joined the Revolutionary Army and eventually rose to the rank of general, fighting alongside the great liberator himself, Simón Bolívar. He even married Bolívar's cousin. On paper, he was impressive. In practice, he had one significant flaw. Every time a battle started going badly, Gregor McGregor had a habit of disappearing, leaving his men, abandoning his post. He didn't lose battles. He simply wasn't there when they ended. In 1819, after a particularly catastrophic campaign in New Granada, where he abandoned an entire regiment of British volunteer soldiers to fend for themselves in hostile territory, McGregor quietly slipped away. He returned to Britain in 1821 with almost nothing. What he had was a uniform, a title, a gift for storytelling, and an idea. In April of 1820, before returning to Britain, McGregor had made a stop along the Mosquito Coast, a remote stretch of Central American jungle on what is now the coast of Honduras. There, he met King George Frederick Augustus, the ruler of the Mosquito Coast's indigenous people. Through charm, flattery, and almost certainly some amount of alcohol, McGregor convinced the king to sign over a land grant, 8 million acres of dense, undeveloped tropical jungle. It was worthless, completely worthless. But Gregor McGregor didn't see worthless jungle. He saw a blank canvas. By the time he arrived in London in 1821, that jungle had become the thriving nation of Poyais. McGregor didn't just claim to own land, he claimed to rule a country. He gave himself the title of cazique, the native word for prince or chief, and he began constructing the most elaborate lie in financial history. He produced official-looking documents, land grants, maps, charts, government proclamations, almost all of them forged. He commissioned a detailed guidebook to Poyais, 355 pages describing its geography, its people, its capital city of St. Joseph, complete with a cathedral, a bank, a theatre, cobblestone streets, and an opera house. He designed a national flag. He printed Poyaisian currency, actual banknotes, beautifully engraved. And then he walked into London society and introduced himself as royalty. London was captivated. The city's Lord Mayor threw him a formal banquet. A wealthy aristocrat offered him and his wife a country estate to use during their stay. He became a regular at London's finest dinner parties, charming earls and financiers and members of Parliament, with stories of his magnificent new country and its boundless potential. In October 1822, he floated a £200,000 bond on the London money market, backed, he claimed, by the revenues of Ponzi. Investors, including some of the city's most sophisticated financial minds, purchased it eagerly. He raised another £200,000 bond the following year. The recruitment drive focused especially on Scotland, his homeland, where he advertised plots of pristine Poyasian farmland at £11 per 100 acres. He sold military commissions to men who wanted to serve as officers in the Ponzi army. He sold government appointments, positions as judges, merchants, tax collectors. He hired an agent in Edinburgh to process applications. One man, a shoemaker, paid for the official title of Shoemaker to the Princess of Ponzi. He was so proud of it. By the time MacGregor was done, he had likely collected the equivalent of tens of millions of dollars in today's money. And 250 people had booked passage on ships to their new home. The first ship arrived at the Mosquito Coast in late 1822. The settlers stood at the railing and looked at the shore. There was no harbour, no city skyline, no cathedral towers, no cobblestone streets. There was jungle, thick, impenetrable, buzzing tropical jungle, and beyond it, a thin strip of muddy beach. They rowed ashore anyway, because they had nowhere else to go. They had spent everything to get here. They had left everything behind. They began trying to build shelters on the beach. They dug wells. They attempted to clear ground. They waited for the welcoming committee that MacGregor had promised would be there to receive them. No one came. Within days, the mosquitoes arrived in force. Then the fever, malaria, yellow fever, dysentery, diseases that tore through people who had no immunity, no medicine, and no shelter beyond crude huts built from branches. A second ship arrived in 1823 with more settlers, who found the first group already devastated. Survivor accounts describe scenes of almost unimaginable suffering. Women had, in the words of one witness, given themselves up to despair. Men who had come as doctors and merchants were too sick to move. The shoemaker, the man who had bought the title of official shoemaker to the Princess of Ponzi, lay sick in his hammock on the beach and shot himself. More than 150 people died. Eventually, a British ship from the nearby colony of Belize stumbled across the survivors and evacuated them. Fewer than 50 people made it back to Britain alive. And when they returned, here is perhaps the most remarkable part of the entire story. Many of them refused to blame MacGregor. They insisted he had been deceived, that the organisers of the voyage had failed him, that Ponzi was real and that someone, somewhere, had made a terrible mistake. The possibility that they had been deliberately conned by a man they trusted, that the country had never existed, was simply too much for some of them to accept. MacGregor understood human psychology in a way that most people never will. He was already in Paris. In France, MacGregor ran the exact same scheme. New documents, new maps, new bonds, new settlers, same country that didn't exist. The French government eventually arrested him in 1826 and put him on trial for fraud. He was acquitted. Only one of his minor associates was convicted. MacGregor returned to London and spent the next decade running smaller versions of the Ponzi scheme, selling land certificates, collecting fees, until the late 1830s, when he quietly retired the operation. In 1838, Gregor MacGregor moved to Venezuela. The The country whose independence he had fought for welcomed him back as a national hero. His military rank was restored. He received back pay and a government pension. He lived out his remaining years in comfort. On December 4th, 1845, Gregor MacGregor died in Caracas at the age of 58. He was given a state funeral and buried with full military honours in Caracas Cathedral. The man who invented an entire country, who printed its currency, wrote its guidebook, sold its land, and sent 250 people to die in its jungle, who ran the same con 3 times across 2 countries, who was tried for fraud and walked free, was buried as a hero. History almost completely forgot about him. The question that stays with me, that I think should stay with you, isn't how he did it. The forgeries, the documents, the charm, those are almost beside the point. The real question is, why did people believe him? And the answer is uncomfortable. They believed him because they wanted to, because he offered them something real people actually want: a fresh start, a better life, a chance to be part of something new. He didn't manufacture greed. He didn't manufacture hope. He just understood those things more deeply than anyone around him. And he used that understanding as a weapon. If you want more stories like this, the ones they buried, the ones that got forgotten, the ones that tell you something true about power and money and human nature, subscribe. There are a lot more where this came from.